Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Sketch. Welcome to the parlor. Welcome to our conversation. I'm Wendy Meakin. This is Duffy, I might say famous Duffy, but you don't know, but you might know him once you see more of his work. But anyway, so this evening we're going to be chatting with Duffy about the work that he creates, the commissions he's done. He's also will be open to anyone chatting with him and learning more about his work. He's open to questions once we've had our initial conversation. But mostly we are going to look through some of his pieces here on our screen. Sorry that the projection isn't working this evening. We also have some pieces. But I'm basically going to be chatting with him about what he does and how he kind of gets his creative process. So anybody who wants to kind of ask a question, please feel free, but maybe after about half hour or so, if that's okay. So Duffy, welcome.
Thank you.
So could you, maybe if you could just tell us, it's a very obvious first question, but let's start with like the kind of the history, the biography of like how you actually got interested in jewellery. Yeah.
When I was about 12, 13, I always wanted to be an illustrator. I had this dream of, drawing Spider-Man, being the next Judge Dredd comic book illustrator. But very quickly realised how repetitive that was as an industry and that I probably wasn't even good enough. And then I was always kind of making things and breaking things. And I remember once cutting my BMX in half, trying to turn it into a go-kart, realising I didn't have the skills to weld something at 9 years old and then hiding it behind the shed. To this day, my brothers still, take the piss out of me for that. One day, my father kind of said, why don't you be a jeweller? You've got a good eye for it. You go to all the antique fairs that my parents used to go to. And I kind of shrugged it off and was like, Dad, don't be stupid. Girls make jewellery. Oh, don't be silly. And it kind of planted a seed. And by the age of sort of 14, 15, I was kind of growing to the idea. And I went and did some work experience at age 16 with a jeweller called Jeremy Hoy in Brighton. I did 2 weeks with him, and I made my first ring and my first necklace, and I helped him produce his work. And I just fell in love from that moment. It was, there was no doubt in my mind that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And then from there, having that in my mind, I looked into doing an apprenticeship, but with my industry, it's very much one area specific. Jewelry is such a vast and broad industry that you're either a stone setter or a mounter or a polisher or an engraver, and you do a 5-year apprenticeship in any one of those areas. And it's quite laborious, and you are just kind of a skilled labourer. You do become a master craftsman, but in one very, very specific area.
Yeah. Actually, can I interrupt you? Not interrupt, but can I just interject there? So yeah, I don't know if anyone's aware, but most people that get involved with jewellery do either one particular thing. You might, like you said, set something, you might do engraving. So you actually can do the entire thing.
Yeah, in its entirety, yeah.
Yeah, it's as its entire. So from the process of designing, taking from design all the way through.
Yeah, from concept to its pure fabrication.
To everything.
Yeah, everything.
Yourself on your own. That's really quite impressive.
Yeah, so
and it's unusual.
It is unusual. I mean, it's few and far between. There are some others, but for the most part, you stick to kind of one skill set.
Right.
So because of that, because of the apprenticeship kind of schemes that only offered one area of expertise, I kind of thought I had a creative brain, and I kind of wanted more knowledge of a general kind of encompassing of jewellery, so I could take all the skills and make my own work. So for me, I looked at a lot of universities. I ended up going and studying at a place called the Kent Institute of Art and Design, which is where a famous jeweller called Stephen Webster, if anyone knows him, he studied there. I studied on the same course that he studied on. I was taught by the same tutors that taught him. And then I graduated. I graduated with a first class honours, and then after leaving, I obviously didn't have lots of money just to go and fund a huge, expensive jewellery collection. So I moved back with my parents at age 21, took over my father's shed, threw all his tools out, dug up the garden, ran power to the shed, and built my first workshop. I worked 7 days a week in 2 jobs for an entire year, and then worked evenings in the workshop to produce my first body of work, which was probably the best and worst thing I've ever done in my life.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that takes us up to like once you'd finished your degree.
Yeah. So my first collection was I graduated just before my 21st birthday.
Okay.
And then at 22, I did my first show in London, self-funded, self-supported, which I could say was a complete flop. but probably wasn't. I learned a lot from it.
Yeah.
I got to make what I wanted to make, pieces that I look back on now and think are horrendous, but at the time loved. And I think more than anything, at least I did it my way. There was no one kind of telling me what I had to produce.
Right.
And then, so I was 22 then and kind of spent all the money I had and didn't really know where I was going.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so if we could jump, because I just think it would be useful. So this is some of Duffy's actual kind of, just, I guess, your packaging, obviously. But if we move to a piece like this, I don't know if everyone can see that here. This is, sorry, yeah, you need to see that.
Yeah.
That's important so you know what we're talking about. So this is a piece which was basically, you were invited by a very famous and a very well-known gem provider to the industry, as it were.
Yeah.
And go ahead, if you want to tell
Yeah,
me.
so I mean, this jumps forward obviously quite a few years, probably jumps forward maybe 5 or 6 years. And by this stage, I had my own workshop, but I was still working in retail, and I was running back to my showroom on my lunch break, setting up my entire showroom, pretending that I'd been there all day working away, seeing a client, getting phone calls from friends saying, you're needed back at the shop, pretending that I had this great showroom of pieces, and then running back to the shop, hoping not to be seen by the client that I'd just seen in my showroom, selling jeans in a shop down the road. But by this stage, I'd probably done self-funded 2 collections of work. I'd got some press. I'd started to kind of gain some kind of acceptance within my industry.
Yeah.
And I went for a meeting. It's a company called Gemfields, and they're an ethically sourced gemstone company, one of the biggest and sort of like best in the world at what they do. You can track the stone from the particular miner that mined it through to which person cut it in India. And I went in for a meeting more just to try and gain a relationship with a good gemstone dealer. And then I left that meeting and they offered me the opportunity to exhibit with their global launch. They travelled the world with this collection. They exhibited in Philips, and it offered me the opportunity to exhibit next to Stephen Webster, Fabergé, Theo Fennell, an endless list of kind of people that I looked up to and admired, and I even wrote my thesis and my dissertation on Fabergé. So to be asked to be part of this kind of confirmed and made me feel like I was finally accepted within my industry, considering I'd never actually worked for anyone within the industry, which is kind of the natural process that most people take.
Yeah, and this is an amethyst.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amethyst, which isn't, it's not the most precious of gemstones, but this particular amethyst, it's 52 carats, it's AAA grade.
Yeah.
The cut of the stone was designed by myself. It's probably the rarest kind of amethyst you can get, size and quality-wise. And even the sort of gridded pear drops on the side were designed by myself, and then I funded the rest of the piece to be a part of the exhibition. But it's got 115 diamonds in it. It's a pretty hefty. It's quite ostentatious, but it was fun to make.
And with a piece like this, what do you do? Do you kind of look at the stone first and then get an idea, or did you actually have an idea that you were going to do a kind of interlocking swan? I mean, they're like swans.
Having left the meeting with them, they'd already picked their 30 designers to launch their brand, to launch their company, and they said, "We'd love you to be a part of it. The only drawback is you need to design the piece and let us know what you'd like the gemstone to be cut like within the next 3-4 days."
Okay.
Which I think in some ways having that pressure can really help a creative, can help you kind of
focus the mind.
Yeah, you have parameters you suddenly have to work within, and it forces you to focus on something. So I literally just ran back to the studio, and I very rarely draw my designs when they're personal work. I'll draw designs for a client because they need to envision what I'm making, but for myself, I can usually just see it in my mind. So I think I did one sketch of just a basic outline, and it just hit straight away, and I knew exactly what I was going to make, which was extremely lucky, because sometimes you can have complete creative block and not have a clue. So I could have missed the opportunity.
And how many man hours, in your case you are a man, so we'll use that, but how many hours does it take to can actually do something like this?
People always ask me, it's quite hard to kind of equate, because you never really sit down with a piece of this kind of size and volume and just start work and work day to day, and there are so many processes involved. You tend to have your other work at the same time that you're working on, and you try and kind of match processes together. So if you're doing a lot of stone setting, you'll set all the stones for this plus other jobs at the same time. But with something like this, I think it was 6 weeks solid work.
Okay, so that's like maybe 5, like just for argument's sake, maybe 5 or 6 hours a day, even though you're doing other bits and pieces. But
Yeah.
so
that piece,
it's
for
a lot
6
of
weeks.
time.
Yeah, very much so.
So then moving into that from this idea of time and the idea of what like luxury represents when we think about luxury brands and buying something and the value that provides you, as it were. Because I mean, Gemfields is the biggest, if I'm not mistaken, is probably the biggest provider of
Colour gems.
precious colored gems to most of
they're one of,
the world,
for sure.
right? One of them, and like you said, ethically sourced. But they're within the luxury sector.
Yeah.
I mean, they reside there very successfully.
Yeah, and they provide stones for most of the big houses.
Yeah. So, what do you feel about this idea of of luxury brands in jewelry? So you've made this, they commissioned you, and this piece was eventually sold.
Yeah.
I believe, right? Have you sold this piece? But I mean, then if you do something, well, I guess, because you and I have talked about that in the past, like this idea about luxury, what does it represent? What does it mean? So for instance, if you do something like this, which are crest rings, these are the crest rings with diamonds. The crest rings with diamonds, you're doing that as a bespoke commission.
Yeah, that's something more classic, it's more traditional.
But what's the difference between like that and like somebody approaching a luxury brand? What do you see as being the difference for a consumer, as it were?
I mean, I think ultimately for me, if you're going into one of the big jewelry houses, for the most part, there's only 1 or 2 of the major jewelry houses in London that have their own workshops nowadays. Most of them farm their work out to people like myself.
Yeah.
Like one of my main skill sets is wax carving for lost wax casting process.
Yeah.
So a jewelry house will send me a design. I will carve the wax, which then they take away and they continue the process with other outsourced jewelers. They'll use a stone setter, the casters, the enamelers, the polishers, but they don't have their own workshops.
Right.
So, in effect, they're not really a luxury jewelry house. They're outsourcing to people like myself. They're offering a very nice settee with a glass of champagne and a nice box, but they are not fine jewelers themselves. They're businessmen, which is kind of what's happened with a lot of the luxury sector, is that it's no longer about the love or craftsmanship that's involved.
Yeah, and I think that might be me.
Yeah.
Keep the mic close to your mouth. Would that be me? Okay. It just feels so loud if I have it that close to my mouth. Okay. So sorry. So that's been distracting, that little humming the entire time. So carry on.
Well, I think that luxury nowadays, with most brands that we see around in the high street and on Bond Street, are not, in the traditional sense, luxury brands. They now offer the idea of luxury. That's what they're selling you. They're not selling you a luxury product. They're selling you the idea of it. I mean, to sum it up, Balenciaga is the perfect example. He was the #1 couturier in the world ever. In around 1966, he turns around and says, "I'm disgusted at the kind of lackadaisical sort of attire that people are wearing, and that people aren't buying beautiful clothing anymore and no longer want to look beautiful. I'm shutting my jewelry. I'm shutting my atelier in my house. I'm done." Years down the line, the brand is bought. They're using the heritage and the prestige of a man's beautiful career, and they're selling sock trainers for £1,000. The man would be like turning in his grave. He would be disgusted. And luxury is actually about the materials, the process, and first and foremost, the love that goes into the making of a piece.
Yeah.
Whether it be clothing, architecture, anything.
Yeah.
It's never done first and foremost for making money. It's done for the creative to produce and make something that they consider to be above and beyond beautiful and luxurious. And I think that's been lost massively. Okay. So you could go to a factory and have this made. You could go to one of the big Bond Street jewelers and ask to have this made, but ultimately it's going to come back to someone like me anyway.
Yeah. So they're more like agents, but not,
I mean, people
think that.
Not all of them, and some of them are incredible at what they do, but there's a huge majority now that are kind of pretending to be what they're advertising themselves to be. So in my opinion, why go to them unless you really want that bag and the carrier bag to come out with, and that status symbol and the idea of luxury, and pay triple the price when you could go to someone. I'm not saying me specifically, but someone like
you specifically. Yes, you should say
but someone like myself that.
No, but I think that's really important to explore, because even where we are, where we're like sitting at this moment, but where Sketch resides within the kind of quarter, the kind of luxury quarter of London. We're just two blocks from Bond Street. We're near also other very kind of expensive places, and so I think that's a really, really interesting way of putting it. The idea of luxury, and that's exactly what's being sold to you all the time, and that's exactly what people are buying into. Yeah. But really, something that's luxurious, whatever that might be to you, but the idea of something being made specifically for you, perhaps maybe ticks that box a little bit better than, like you say, like Cartier, Fabergé, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think it depends what you want, and I think there's room for everything. There's room for manufactured, cheap, high street fashion jewelry. There's room for luxury brands that are just selling the idea of luxury. If that floats your boat and that's what you want, by all means, go and get it. But I think there should be some responsibility on the part of the seller to the consumer to offer a high quality product. It's all well and good saying, well, they're going to pay this for it. Why not make it out of cheap leather, cheap material, cheap thing, because we make more profit. If they're still happy, it's fine. In my opinion, I think that's completely wrong and kind of unethical. I think, really you should be
able to produce something,
and if anything,
do it well.
And educating your customer and kind of elevating them and allowing them to understand what they're purchasing, rather than just, it's got a name on it, buy it, and you can walk around and hold your head high that you're wearing a sock with a name on it. It's
I completely agree with you. So then that leads to how you do work with an individual. What is the process that do you have a kind of methodology when you first meet somebody? Is there a kind of idea that...
I mean, for me, as you can probably tell from my appearance, it's not about putting on a suit and putting on the appearance of luxury. My workshop is my workshop. You come to my studio and it's a messy jeweler's workshop. It's a dusty floor. My dog's there. I'm there. It's
not that... Actually, I should confess, I'll confess, I've actually had a few pieces made for myself by Duffy, and I found him in a very kind of organic way. I bought a piece of jewelry that he had made in Berlin. And when I was purchasing it, the guy looked at me and said, "You know that this is an English jeweler?" And I said, "No, I don't. I saw it, I absolutely loved it, and I had to have it. It didn't even fit me, really, but I decided to buy it. And then I found Duffy somehow online, and I tracked him down, and I said, would you be willing to alter this ring for me that I purchased? And you were... Initially, I don't know, you're probably like, I don't know, that might take a bit of my time. I'm just guessing. I have no idea really what went on. But then I also
The truth is, I thought, who's this strange woman that's contacted me and said, you've been impossible to find, can you size my ring? And I said, what ring, who are you?
But I added, the tagline at the end was like, and actually maybe I have a commission in mind, would you be willing to meet with me? So we met, and he did do another thing for me. But... and he encased basically in a pendant my deceased dog's ashes. So I did a bit of a memento mori with him. So that's how it came about. But I mean, so I don't think your space is very untidy, but that's just that. I wouldn't call it untidy in any stretch. Okay. So after this evening, and every one of you is going to do a commission, right? So you're all going to go, and you're going to see what his studio is like.
You're all more than welcome anytime. Yeah. Seriously.
But so tell us about that process. So when someone initially meets with you, what do you do? How do you work it out with somebody?
I mean, I think the joy of working with any kind of creative that is like myself is that it can be different for every client. You're able to work organically, and you're able to offer each client what they require within reason.
Right.
If someone comes in and says, can you copy this Tiffany ring? I'm going to say, no, go and buy the Tiffany ring.
Okay, so you do that. So you would actually say to someone, but a lot of people might copy it.
It's kind of one, it's pointless on everyone's, it's a waste of time for everybody and money, and it's ethically, I wouldn't do that. It's someone else's design. It's
like a kind of plagiary, so you're not interested in being a plagiarist.
But I think for the most part, I'm able to work with each client individually. So if a client wants to come in 50 times through the process, they're more than welcome to do so. If someone wants to just say, this is my budget, I love what you do, go hell for leather and do whatever you like, I can do that. If someone says, I have these kind of vague ideas, can you help me kind of eke them out and work out what it is I'm trying to achieve? I think that is the joy of working with someone like myself. You're not walking into a department store where you're having to really book in time and kind of feel like you're just another customer. You know, I only do a certain amount of work a year, which by nature only means I can take on so many clients.
So, and you do everything by yourself. So you do.
Yeah.
You don't really have anybody that you're outsourcing to. So it's a completely 100%
the only thing I really
Duffy
outsource is some of my casting.
Okay.
Purely because if I'm carving, without boring you with the technique, but if I'm carving something super ornate in wax, and the lost wax technique means that you lose that wax model in the process. Yeah. If the metal flows into that mold and it doesn't flow fully 100% into the mold and you lose that design, you've lost those hundreds of hours of carving. So using a caster isn't so much a skill, it's more of just machinery and technology nowadays. So they have like vacuum machines that can pull the air out of a mold to pump the metal in beforehand. And it's something that I don't really need to have within my studio because it takes up so much space.
So for instance, like on a piece like that, so you would carve that initially.
That's 100% in my studio.
Yeah, you would carve that initially in wax.
Yep. So you carve a wax, you make a mold, you melt the wax out, you pour the metal in.
Yeah, no, I know how it works.
Yeah, sorry.
Wanting everyone else to know how it works.
So I carve a wax model. You make a kind of investment mold around it, which is like a heat-proof plaster, for want of a better description. You kiln that mold to melt the wax out. You create a negative space. It's the same process that's been used for millions of years. Yeah, no, at least 1,000 easily. Yeah. I mean, no, it's a very amazing. It's crazy. And then you pour metal into this mold, and then you remove the plaster outside, and then you end up with your basic ring signet, from which you then file, clean, polish to develop a basic clean, polished signet ring. And then you freehand sketch the crest on. So in this case, it was some twin sisters that wanted their family crest. They provided me with the crest. I freehand sketched from a printed design the crest onto the ring, and then basically hand engrave the metal away through a microscope, piece by piece, until you end up with a shiny, more or less what you see before you, and then you set the diamonds at the side as a separate thing. Okay. So it's incredibly labor intensive. And then getting back, because I'm always fascinated by this piece, I think it's amazing. So is that also just completely carved, or does that get cast as well? That's hand carved. That's all in hand wax carved. In 3 pieces. Wow. Okay. And then constructed. Constructed together. Okay. Yeah. So if we can move forward a bit. So then a piece like this, if we could explore a piece like this, that's actually kind of wood and precious metal and a precious stone. Yeah, so that's ebony, 18 karat gold, and yellow sapphire. It's like an asymmetrical shield-shaped yellow sapphire. I made a pair of these, and one was an indicolite tourmaline, which is like a kind of turquoisey-ish blue tourmaline. But yeah, these are ebony, so they're basically wood. With 18 karat gold, but this would be made completely differently. So this is purely fabricated. So from start to finish, you'd shape the wood. You'd get the wood to the shape you need for the ring, and then all the metal work would be hand fabricated. So by that I mean you'd pour and smelt metal, and then you put it through a rolling mill, which basically creates a flat sheet from which you can then work and cut metal. And that became the interior, so the actual kind of the I mean every part of it, even the setting, is all hand. So you create sheet, you'd hand cut every piece, you'd solder pieces together, and you'd fabricate every single piece in its entirety, and then construct it. Wow. And then setting the stone is obviously a separate process of its own as well. And in a piece like this, is the gemstone itself the piece that was something you wanted to do first? Like, did you find a stone first and then thought? Actually, yeah. With these, I knew I wanted to make something in ebony. I kind of had a vague idea of where I wanted to be with it, and then I have one gemstone dealer that he's grown to really know the things I like. Right. I'm a bit. Most people go in having a full hand-drawn, purposely designed piece. Mm-hmm. Painted up in the dimensions they need when they go and see their gemstone dealer. and they can say, right, I need,
like
a 6
4
by 4,
carats,
like standard
Yeah.
sizes or standard shapes. I generally go more off feel and what jumps out at me. So even before cost and size, so I often just say to my gemstone dealer, what tourmalines have you got? What sapphires have you got? And he'll just send me a bunch to kind of sift through. And these two just jumped out at me. So I actually had these in my safe for about 2 years
Wow.
before I began working on the actual project. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the other thing, this idea that you just kind of walk into a situation. I mean, you actually had those stones for 2 years before you really kind of knew. You were attracted to the stones, but you didn't really know what to do with them. So it's a huge kind of investment, the investment in you in a way. So when someone's commissioning a piece from you, the idea that there's like all this knowledge behind it is something that nobody really understands when you have anything made for you.
Yeah,
there's all that you're buying into.
It's quite funny. I've just got back from New York. I've been with my sister-in-law who runs a contemporary art gallery, and we often had kind of quite heated debates on the fact that I like contemporary art, but I struggle with it because for me, often the case can be that you can have no skill within something. The material value can be near to nothing, yet there is no cap on what someone can charge, or what something will sell for. Fine jewelry, you're dealing with the most precious materials in the world, the hardest things to mine and source. Then you have the skill it takes, like the multiple years. I'm 15 years in, and I feel like I'm just beginning. I'm considered a master craftsman within what I do, but I feel like I'm miles away from that. And it's this kind of strange thing that people will put a cap and a value on certain things with jewelry, but they forget that all the time that it's taken for someone like myself to get to this stage and be able to have the ability to do this. You're not just paying for a ring, you're paying for the knowledge of my style and my development over the years. And it could sound quite pompous to say that, but it's if you want something within my style, you kind of have to come to me and pay for it to get it. The same with anyone that does what they do by hand. You can't say, well, I could get someone else to make that. I'm like, yeah, you could now. You've seen it, and you could take that to another maker and get them to try and copy it. But ethically, if they did that, that's disgusting. It's quite a strange. Yeah, it's quite a strange thing to deal with. I think some customers get it and some don't. But if they don't get it, then they're not really for me in the nicest possible way. I think my sort of target audience and client base, I understand, is very small. My style is only for some. A lot of my work's quite big. It's quite bold. It's quite.
Well, I think it really is pretty. If we could just move forward, so that's and then this is another piece, I guess, in a similar series.
Yeah, that's from the
series,
same. Yeah, that's with ebony and grey diamonds.
Is that white gold or?
It's white gold with grey diamonds.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to set wood or it's hard to set a precious metal into wood, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world.
I mean, they're two really radically different materials. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, jewelry or art or whatever you're doing, I mean, it's all about the materials. I mean, it's you have to have a love and understanding of the material. If you're an artist, anything. I mean, especially with what you're doing, more than anything, because it's also, you're also kind of you're a goldsmith. I mean, you're a goldsmith.
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine told me this story once. He's a friend of mine. He's an antique restorer. He works for Sotheby's and Christie's, and he was asked once to go on site and fix something very quickly within an exhibition, and something had been dropped overnight. It was a piece of silverware, and it had bent, and it was a almost priceless piece of work. And he went in, and they were like, "Can you help us? There's a huge dent in this thing. We don't know what to do. Can you, it's worth X amount. It's about to go into auction. There's potential buyers interested. We need to disguise the fact that this has happened." So he turns around and he bends it and puts it back on the thing. It's done. Does it by hand in 2 seconds. And they're like, "Oh, great, thank you very much. So how much is that?" And he was like, £1,000, please. They were like, £1,000? That took you 2 seconds. What? He said, no. He said it's £5 for doing it. It's $995 for knowing
how to do it.
To do it.
Exactly. That's great.
And that's where it lies with this.
It's all about the knowledge.
It's 15 years of my time, my investment. I lived in my studio for 5 years. It's this kind of love of what I do to get me to where I am that allows me to make the pieces that I make. And if you genuinely would like one, then you should appreciate the fact that I've put so much time in.
We know where to find you. We're gonna let everyone know that after the fact. But then if we move into a piece like that, well, this is so you also done a lot of big collaborations. So you've done bespoke work and you've done individual concept pieces with people, whatever. But you've also done a fair amount of collaboration. So this was with Foot Patrol, is that correct?
Yeah. So this is kind of
sneaker trainer.
It's like a
outlet,
sneaker store.
Right?
It kind of my collaborations are quite varied and they kind of cross quite strange levels of different clientele, but this was recent. This was I loved trainers as a kid. I loved this store. They're sort of one of the first, sneakers are huge now, and they were one of the first sneaker stores in London, and their logo is a gas mask, and they went around about 10 different makers and CAD workers, because CAD is such a huge thing now, computer
Does everyone know what CAD is?
Like rapid
Computer-assisted
prototyping,
design?
printing waxes rather than hand carving them, and none of them could get their heads around it because most CAD workers aren't actually makers. They're more like IT guys that don't have the kind of creative side of the brain to make it happen. They can technically do anything on the computer, but they don't have the visual
to do it, actually do it.
So they came to me and asked me, and I was like, it's pretty tricky. It's a 2-dimensional image. We'll give it a go. But that's a recent one. I did that. I've done things with Stella McCartney and Off-White and various brands.
Do you all know who all those people are? Yeah, you do, don't you? But we can move forward. I could also show. So this is another piece. Do you remember when you did that?
That's quite early. That reminds me. I was in the first time I ever showed my work in Paris. The editor of the jewelry section of Vogue came along, and she was quite an elderly lady. I don't think she does it anymore. And she kind of went through the showroom of people's work and was, into everybody's work that was quite traditional. And she got to these, which are just basically, I guess they're just knuckle dusters with big claws on them in solid silver, which, I don't know, for me, it was a lot of the time when I was younger, it was about technically trying to make something that was very difficult. So to make these, technically it's quite hard. Soldering sheets of metal or straight line forms is extremely difficult because when you heat metal, it warps and buckles. So I kind of designed these more just for me. It was like being an artist. It was like I felt the need to make these. Yeah. So I funded them and made them and found the time and produced them and showed them with the rest of my work. And she kind of swept through this showroom and lovely, looking at all these people's work. And she came to these and she just went, "Why? You can't sell these." I said, "Well, maybe I don't want to. It's not all about...
It's about exploring.
It's not all about money." Yeah. I mean, it took me years to even realise that being a jeweller could be a viable prospect as a career and I could actually make money out of it. So sometimes I think the creative process is the most important part. And like I said earlier, with kind of, with Balenciaga and any of the greats and Louis Vuitton, they all started out with a pure love for what they did and trying to push boundaries. Louis Vuitton just kind of took the normal trunk and completely revolutionised it. Yeah, took the dome top off, made it flat, easy for stacking.
And you could see the carcass you could see the ribs on the side.
Yeah, got rid of all the metal hinges, put a canvas hinge in, made it lighter for travel, much more functional, fully opening.
It
was all about purely for their own development.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And the monetary thing was a
secondary.
Bonus. Yeah,
absolutely.
And this is why I make these things.
So I guess it's a kind of old debate and it's an old question, but I guess, do you buy into the fact, or not buy into the fact, but do you consider yourself an artist or an artisan? And it's a very old debate, and it's a debate that people love to think is kind of old-fashioned. But I wonder where you feel you posit yourself within this whole...
Good question. I think, for the most part, the making is everything to me. I feel like the creative side, I think I was lucky enough to have been born with a creative mind, not necessarily a kind of intellectual one, and therefore...
Too overrated intellectualism.
No, but
I've heard.
But I think for me, it's allowed me to put the two together. Yeah. I didn't have the kind of brain that allowed me just to go and become an apprentice and just set stones 24/7
and just
the rest
sit
of my
there
life.
And kind of almost be robotic.
Yeah. Although I'm extremely jealous of like the top guys that can do that because they have skill beyond me within that niche that I'll never have. But I'm never going to spend 50 years doing the same process. So for me, I think though the making is first and foremost, and it's what's always pushed me because there have been times when I could have taken my work in a direction that could have made me money or a lot more money. but I've chosen to kind of maybe learn something new and develop my work and push it in a new direction. I don't necessarily have... I have a kind of aesthetic, I think, that you can recognise as my work for sure, but it's not like I have one specific style. You know, I do traditional pieces for people, you know, traditional signets, and then I'll make stupid knuckle dusters, and then huge, ostentatious, really high-end work, and then I'll work with brands and make kind of consult with them on their production.
Here, I'll just...
so it's extremely varied.
That was a bespoke piece, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But here, let's just go to, so just so you can see, Duffy has obviously, so Rihanna owns some of his jewellery, wears some of his stuff. Commissioned you? Did she commission you specifically?
Not she didn't commission me for this. This was through her stylist.
Okay. Janet Jackson. I mean, so it's big, right? I mean, yeah, it's true. I don't mean to... But you would look at Duffy and maybe think, has he ever met Janet Jackson? I don't know. It doesn't look like it, maybe, but there you go. I mean, it's quite impressive. You are. It's your humility is, it's attractive. You know, it's amazing. But you've like seriously done some majorly big pieces. Like, so this was a necklace she wore, right?
Yeah.
And how did you construct something like that?
Do
you remember?
I do actually. I'm trying to think. That strangely developed from probably one of the only things that I did at university that really stuck was we were set a project that was to develop a new interlocking chain that could work, that could be singularly cast and interlocked of its own accord without any fabrication, if that makes sense. So without actually having to solder the links together. And
yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
Does everyone understand that idea?
Yeah, so rather than physically having to bond the link together through soldering and it being physically stuck together, something that could be kind of interlocked and then taken apart without any kind of tools, basically.
Yeah. So you could kind of twist it or move it depending on...
So this one doesn't do that. But
okay. But
the one I did at university did, and its style and its shape was very much like this, and I always wanted to develop it further and use diamonds and precious stones and kind of precious materials to make a super high-end kind of... Yeah, and it's
articulated almost, it's very skeletal. I mean, what's really exciting about it, I mean, to me, I think what's really interesting about it is it's in its entirety there, but it's skeletal.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of my work, I think, if you ever look, it's all quite organic. It's all quite nature-led. It always sounds a bit cheesy when I say that. I kind of think of chintzy kind of arts and crafts, but it is quite nature-led. There's a lot of kind of feathers and kind of organic shape and kind of nature-led kind of aesthetic within my work. And I think a lot of that just comes from being younger and hanging out with my dad and going fishing and trawling the beach for feathers and I guess a lot of my work is quite nostalgic and kind of looking back quite a lot to kind of childhood memories in a really positive way. So
So do you think that nature is your biggest inspiration maybe somehow?
Yeah, I mean, I hate saying it because it sounds so cliched and so like...
But you know, cliches exist for a reason. They exist because they usually transcend something. I don't think it sounds so cliche. I mean, most really interesting artists, because it's about looking, isn't it? It's about like spending time with. It's about it's observing, and then it's about taking all that and creating something that you can recognize. Yeah,
and I guess once again, without sounding like a complete cheesy hippie, the kind of by nature the materials are all inherently from the earth. They're all they're not like some crappy weird alloy that's been made in a factory. They're natural materials that can be used over and over again, which I was always quite drawn to in itself.
Yeah, no, I mean I think it's incredible work, and I probably should open it up to the floor for a second. But I just thought, could I do one just quick fire round? So if I said a particular thing, if you just give me a one-word response. Okay, so if I said, it's hard. So if I said rubies.
Pigeon blood.
Pigeon blood.
Yeah. It's the rarest, most precious coloured ruby you can desire or get. Yeah.
News to me. I love that. Okay, pigeon blood. Diamonds.
Not as great as everyone thinks.
Okay, well that's several words. Not as good as everyone thinks, but no, it's okay. But I feel the same. It's like the most common stone around. I mean,
they're amazing, and some of them are rare, and some of them are beautiful, and at certain sizes and qualities, they're incredible.
They're in surplus.
They're not everything.
They've been monopolized for sure. Sapphire.
I can't say more than one word, can I?
And it's hard, right? I thought about this. I was like, Because I went to all the symbolic
rainbows.
Because I'm
There
an
you
art
go.
historian.
Rainbows.
I know my art historian background. I was like, every time a color or rubies, whatever, it's like, okay, passion. But you know, it's like hard to think of one word.
I'm sticking with rainbows.
So, okay, rainbows. Okay, rainbows. And then how about amethyst?
Underrated.
I think amethysts are really underrated.
Massively
I agree with
underrated.
you. Okay. Is there anything else you would just like to share with us that I haven't? Well, I hope this was very conversational. I actually have a lot of questions I didn't ask you, but I wanted it to be more kind of accessible. Is there anything else you wanted to share with anyone just before I open it up to the?
Thanks for coming.
The floor.
And listening to me
Yeah, thank you.
talk.
Yeah,
And
no,
kind of
absolutely.
feel a bit like kind of pompous sat here with a microphone.
No, you should honestly look at this, guys.
But thank you
Don't
very
you think
much.
he should be a household name? Look at this. I mean, look at the stuff he's done. Oh, I forgot to show that one. Look at this. Do you see this one? Who's that for? Is that for Mr.
That was for Professor Green.
Professor Green?
That was quite.
Look
that
at
was
him.
actually
He
funny.
went big. He went large.
He originally came for
Look at
one
that.
of these, which is kind of one of my. It's an early piece, and it's a really staple kind of one of the pieces I make. And as much as I tried to steer away from making skull rings, it was like a staple thing. And he came to me and was like, "Duff, I really want to make this thing, but I kind of just want to buy one of your skulls, but I really want to make this thing." I said, "Well, what's the thing? Tell me." He's like, "Well, I was born and bred in Hackney. Well, I want to make the Hackney logo, the green H, in green diamonds in a massive signet." I was like, "We're making that." Like 100%.
Hackney. But, I mean, don't you think that Hackney Council should know about that? That should be part of their. Come to Hackney.
To be honest, it's one of my proudest moments. It's like one of the best things I think I've ever made. Just it's so absurdly ridiculous.
It's almost like a mesh T-shirt thing he did on the side. You know, all the guys that wear mesh.
I mean, it's just the more ridiculous.
I mean, it's a total cultural phenomena right there.
This is larger than a £2 coin, so it's
amazing.
It's big. It's like
Yeah, we all know who Professor Green is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about these pieces? These are very more delicate.
Oh, they were for Off-White. So Virgil Abloh contacted me.
You guys don't know who that is too, right? Okay.
Yeah, okay. So I weirdly got a WhatsApp from him, which is pretty random, being like, "Oh, someone recommended you. You did some bits for them. I really like what you do."
Who did you do it for?
What, the pieces?
Who was his contact? Stella McCartney?
No, it was no. It was someone really random. It was someone you wouldn't expect.
Really major.
No, you wouldn't. It was someone you wouldn't expect to be one of his affiliates. It was just someone really quite straight laced as well. Anyway,
straight laced.
He contacted me and said, "We've got this idea. We want it on the runway. I'd love to be able to make real leaves as brooches, like real size leaves as brooches. Can you do it? Can you do it in 4 weeks?"
Wow, 4 weeks. That's
and
fast.
I normally say 6 to 8 weeks of a signed off design commission, one piece for a client. And obviously I was like, "Yeah, of course, mate. Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah. Easy." And then panicked and realised that casting leaves is near to impossible, and had to kind of develop a completely new way of doing it, and then achieved it and was so happy with the result. And then I was also quite touched as well that in this day and age, Instagram, everyone's so vain and so kind of insular and so narcissistic. It was his idea, ultimately that's his idea, and I just kind of made it happen for him in the best possible way I could. And he credited me. And to me, I think that's a hugely kind of respectful thing to do for someone of his kind of stature and size, to kind of, he didn't need to by any means. And for him to kind of credit me and talk about it and say how happy he was with what I did and what I'd produced for him, I think is quite commendable in this day and age where most people would rather take the credit themselves and kind of make it all about them.
That was going to be a question, Instagram, but I avoided that. But maybe
that could have gone on for...
Yeah, we could have gone for a long time on Instagram. But maybe now we could ask anyone... Does anyone have any questions? Oh, yes. Would you like the microphone?
No. What was your new technique? How did you make the leaves? It was... So firstly, you have to find them not completely dry. So you have to go and find the leaves, which is tough enough when it's the wrong season, that haven't completely dried out yet, because if they dry too much, they completely crack and they're really brittle. If they're fresh and then you take them inside, they dry out too quick and they become really brittle. So you have to find them when they're almost mid-state, when they're still kind of malleable.
Transitioning, right? They're
when they're kind of malleable.
Yeah, they're a bit wet, they're moist, right?
Yeah, moist, and then very slightly moist. And then as they just dry out in the studio, the second they're sort of rid of any kind of surface moisture, you have to coat them in literally just household primer, paint, on the back only. And then you have to get 3 coats on before the paint actually begins to fully dry, because once again it does the same, it shrinks and cracks. You have to create the mold, but you have to use a cold cure mold rather than a hot mold, which is what you normally use with metal. And then hope that there's no shrinkage involved as the mold is curing. And then you also have to make sure that you've got a perfectly even 1.2 mil coating of primer across the whole leaf. Otherwise, it's either too thick and too heavy to wear, and the whole thing droops, or if it's too thin, the cast doesn't take, and then it opens up, and you have holes basically throughout the cast. And then polishing them was a whole new problem, because the detail on the leaf is so fine.
Yeah.
When you polish metal, I mean, most people don't realise you're actually basically just wearing metal away. It's like using sandpaper, but an ultra fine version of sandpaper when you polish with a polishing mop. And if you remotely go too hard with the polish, then it's ruined. Like the whole design's worn away. So it was a case of trying out about 60 different polishing mops and working out which wouldn't destroy the effect without kind of bastardizing it. So yeah, it was a fun one. It was lots of just panic painting and molds, and I mean the studio was a mess. I was a mess. It was kind of, it worked out, which was great.
You had 4 weeks.
Yeah. It's usually the case. I think most people don't really realise the time in which any craft takes, and the amount of people that kind of approach you and say, "Can you do this?" But when it's a project that you like and it's from someone like that you're like, "Oh, yeah, of course." You kind of say yes before you've even thought through what you've got to do, and then suddenly you're in panic mode and you have to make it happen. But I think in itself, I always work better under pressure. If he said I had 6 months, I probably wouldn't have achieved it. I would have probably sat around and done my other commissions, and then suddenly gone, "Oh yeah, I'll do that," and then it wouldn't have worked. I think the fact you have that pressure makes you kind of sit in the studio all night long and then pass out for 2 hours and get up and carry on and just make it work. Thanks. Cheers, Anna.
Yes?
First of all, thank you so much for sharing your personal stories. It's inspiring.
Thank you.
But I was really interested when you were talking about the timeline and how, so at age 21, after you graduated, you said you moved back in with your parents and been there, done that. And I'm just kind of curious about what kind of insights you have for people that are, young or old, just people that, want to pursue their dreams, but have certain obstacles that continue to get in their way. I mean, do you have any sort of advice?
Yeah, you're going to cry a lot.
Yeah.
You're going to cry a lot. You're going to wonder what you're doing a lot. I think it's not losing sight of why you're doing something, and also the direction you're heading. So on many occasions, I'd look at other people, which is always the worst thing you can do, and think, "Oh, well, they're doing that and that's selling. Maybe I should try that style, or I should be doing that thing."
Yeah.
Worst thing you could possibly do. I think I'd rather die poor, having stuck to my guns and made things I was ultimately really happy about, even if it meant working 24 hours a day in another job and then going home and having to do my own work. At least my own integrity would be intact, and I would have stuck to what I truly believed. If that means, which I've done, I've lived in my studio, I've ate baked beans and had no money, and put any money I've had back into my work, which is kind of what I still do, to be honest, just on a much higher level. You just take the money and you go, "Cool, well, I could do something with this, like go on holiday, or I could just make something ridiculous and see if it sells," And I think it's maintaining your end goals. I mean, my girlfriend's sat over there, she might disagree with me with this, but it's just sticking to what you love and working out the few things that you definitely want. The amount of times I've rung up my girlfriend, my parents, and been like, what am I doing? When I was like 18, 19, 21, 22, maybe 25, I was like, what am I doing? This is absurd. I'm competing with people that have huge funding and backing and money and come from dynasties of jewellers, and their parents are jewellers, and they have all the funding and the contacts and the capabilities around them to do whatever they want. But then that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I want to make jewellery. So if I fall out of love with that, then I would have stopped doing it. But ultimately, if it makes me happy to make jewellery, then you find a way. and you can't think about the monetary side of it and the kind of I don't know, like the press or the little accolades that come with it, because for the most part, what I actually do, although the end result is, I guess, luxury and glamorous, the back end of it is not glamorous. You know, I'm covered in polish, I'm working long hours, I'm in a studio, I'm sat at a microscope for 15 hours a day. But for me, the end result is worth it. Whether anyone likes it is irrelevant. You know, if no one likes what I'm doing, is irrelevant. It helps. Of course it helps. But it's like, I guess it is going back, the artisan artist argument is, that's when I'm an artist. It's when, for me, it's irrelevant. It's the love and the need to have to just do it because I feel the need to do it. Whether anyone's going to buy it or love it or care for it, it's irrelevant.
That's amazing. That's a good answer.
No worries.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Comments or... Yes, Joanna.
What's the most interesting bespoke commission you've ever done?
Most interesting? I don't know, I've done some very obscure ones, some very strange requests. A lot of teeth. Yeah, a lot of teeth.
People's teeth. They commission you to do their children's teeth. Yeah.
Children, grandparents, dogs, I've done dogs, did Jack Driver's dogs. I've done all kinds of weird sort of things like that for sure. I'm trying to think most interesting though. I think that's probably it. They're the ones that kind of sort of throw you a bit when someone sort of walks in and pulls out like oh no, that was it. I did it was a dead pet rat's tail.
Oh.
Entombed and bound into like I don't even know what an object. It wasn't even jewelry. It was like into a. They had this idea. I made it happen. Let's put it like that. It was very strange. Yeah,
so
very
you cast
very odd.
a young child's rat's tail, perhaps a young child. I've actually met.
No, they were 32.
Yeah, I was going to say I've actually met grown people that
they
have
were
rats
32.
as pets. It's kind of interesting.
Their pet rat died,
Right.
and they had its tail for some reason, which I don't know.
Interesting.
And I kind of embalmed it and put it in something, along with some Egyptian beads they had, which was, the whole thing was very obscure.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll forget about that one.
Well, anything else? Anyone else? Yes. Yes.
Is there any way that you could take what you do and retain the integrity with which you do it and bring it into a more scalable fashion?
Yeah, I think it can be done. No, I think it can be done. I think there are people that do it very well. You know, I wasn't at the beginning. Don't get me wrong. There are incredible. I'm talking from my industry. There are incredible jewelry houses that maintain complete credibility. And I beg any of you to go home and look up a brand called Hermele. They're 125 years old this year, and I think like the 15th grandson of however many centuries has just taken over the family business, and it's pushing boundaries. They're using unusual materials, and they have a quality that is second to none, and it works. But I think the problem is now is everything is dealt with business first, product second, which started with whatever the guy's name is, something Arno, that took over Louis Vuitton.
Today.
Because
He's given 200 million euros to help rebuild.
Yeah, because up until
Notre Dame.
The Louis Vuitton Foundation and company and brand was run by family, and ancestors of Louis Vuitton took over decade after decade, and it was only once that guy, whatever his name is, I can't remember. As soon as he got involved, he only got involved purely for business purposes. And it was purely done to make money. And he went around and took over every business he could, flipped them, destroyed some. He sacked 8,000 people. It's ruthless. And that's pretty much from that day, that's when fashion and luxury changed.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
So it's totally doable. Before then, everyone was doing it. It was scalable and worked, and there were people that loved what they did. And Couturier was a massive thing. Now there's only 200 clients for Couturier in the world. It's totally doable, and I think it will claw its way back. I think, I have the clients, people like yourself that source people like myself out. They exist.
Well, I felt very special just then.
But they exist. It's with thanks to people like Wendy and people like Wendy that allow me
I'm not doing anything super
do what I
major.
do. No, but it's
Thank you.
thanks to people like yourself that allow me to do what I do and grow, and then introduced me to other people, and you know,
It's
and
all, so it's all like kind of creating community, getting to kind of educate your clients, understanding
first
what's
and
at
foremost,
stake when you
educating
actually
people.
go into that process of having something made for you.
Yeah.
It's not just expensive for expense's sake. It's
Exactly.
expensive because somebody's made it by hand. Of
course.
Whether it be, and that is something I think that we need to kind of help keep alive.
Of course.
Because if we don't continue to do it, it won't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
So
why-
guys, ready? We're going to take some commissions now. Are you all ready? Okay.
But no, by all means, you are always welcome in the studio. My studio's got an open door policy, and
Yeah, do you have any cards on you though? Did you bring
I
any
do,
cards?
yeah, I have some
so
cards.
if
And there's a
anyone
couple of
wants to
pieces
take
here
a
if
card,
you
and
want to have a
there's
look.
some
It's
pieces
quite
here.
low
You guys wanna
lit, so
come
it's
and
kind of
have
hard.
a look? Was that was that a sufficient answer? Was it okay? Any other
Cool.
questions? Oh yes.
I'm just wondering who your favourite person that you've worked with or for is and why.
I was going to say something besides myself, and I'm joking.
Of course, Wendy.
Totally a joke.
No,
Totally a joke.
Do you know what? I'm asked this question a lot, and often the main one that I'm asked, but whenever I'm spoken to or interviewed, is like, oh, like, who's your favourite celebrity client? Who's this and that? And I like, to be honest, well, it's great, and it's lovely to have celebrity clients or kind of people of importance, shall we say, or stature, but they've got the money. Like, to me, it's when a friend or a family member or someone that doesn't need to come to me and doesn't need to spend their hard-earned money comes to me. That, like, it sounds cheesy, but it really does. It means so much more. Like, if a close friend who, especially if it's another sort of creative that, like, one of my peers that I appreciate or admire what they do, and then they come to me and get me to do something, it's the best. And 9 times out of 10, I end up just offering a trade, and there's like this whole kind of like trade thing that happens. But that means a lot to me. But of course, yeah, it's always a bit of a kick when someone known is wearing your stuff or purchases your work or you get to meet them. Of course, I don't think anyone doesn't get starstruck to a certain degree. You know, I don't become sycophantic and crazy, but it's kind of amazing when someone's in your studio and you sort of pinch yourself and think, you know, when I was 14 and decided to be a jeweler and now suddenly I'm sat here and I've got these kind of clients, you know.
Professor Green, basically making the new...
It's fun, you know. It's like, it's a nice thing to be able to say. But for me, every piece really is important, and I think if I can provide someone with something they're going to love and cherish forever, then my job's kind of done. I think, you know, that's good enough for me. That's good enough for me.